Hello everyone, Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity here with your weekly update. It is Friday, September 1st, 2017, and I want to start out by talking to you about the markets. Now, on Monday, we had all this horrible information flowing in around Harvey in the United States, a very catastrophic storm. The information was really bad, and the futures, the stock futures, those things which sort of predict where the market's going to open, for the S&P 500 were down 15 points, looking very weak. And I want to talk to you about what happened in the first one and then second minute of trading. Futures are down. The stock market should have started to sell off, but somebody stepped into the market. The first minute was this giant green candle of buying, and the second minute, a giant green candle of buying, and we are now up 50 points across the whole week from that open here on Friday. So what happened here? Well, I'll tell you what happened was you look at the market internals and you discover that somebody was in there buying heavily the highly leveraged products that drive the market, horsewhip it, like the flea that wags the tail that wags the dog, right? So this is the kind of stuff we've been seeing for a long time. My diagnosis of this is that we have the central bank and its proxies, which include the big banks and the largest high-frequency trading firms, that these individuals are so scared of a market decline that anytime there's bad news, they step in and they start buying it because they want the market to signal happiness, they want the market to signal good things, but it's a world of fake prices. Just like you live in a world of fake news, you live in a world of fake prices as well. Now, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with the central bank stepping in and stabilizing markets and making them go back to all-time highs? We should all love that, right? It makes us all wealthier. Well, those of you who actually own stocks, that's true. But for the majority of people who don't own stocks, that's not true. And pay no attention to the fact that as they save the world by making markets higher, they themselves, their friends, their colleagues are all getting very wealthy in the process. Pay no attention that they're driving the largest wealth inequality in the world as they save the world by driving markets higher. And by the way, this isn't just the U.S. Federal Reserve alone. This is central banks around the organized Western world at this point in time, China included too. So, but what's wrong with that? What's wrong with driving volatility back down? What's wrong with making the markets go up? Well, it kind of brings to mind this quote by John F. Kennedy, who said, "Those who would make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable." I think there's an inevitable violent revolution coming to our markets at some point because they've suppressed volatility for so long. Now, how did they drive the markets higher all week? Well, I'll tell you, those first two green candles we saw that Monday morning, what we saw in those moments was somebody was selling the bejesus out of the VIX products on the ETFs. These are the volatility products. They compress volatility. It makes the algorithms start to buy other options and futures, which makes the cash market go the direction it's going to go. That's how they do it at this point in time. That is the flea wagging the tail that wags the dog. So that's how it works. Now, what's the narrative all week, though? How has the media, the fake news media, been telling you the reason for why the markets have been going higher? Well, here's a headline. It's from Reuters. This came out on Tuesday, I think, as the markets were really rebounding. It said, "Dollar rebounds, stocks gain as North Korea missile fears recede." What? So remember, there was all this hoopla. It was over the weekend. Maybe, there was going to be a crisis with North Korea, but then they say it recedes. And these have been the headlines all week, is that the fears have receded. But here's some other headlines from this week, including North Korea fires missile over Japan. Trump says all options on the table after North Korea missile launch. Putin warns U.S.-North Korea tensions on verge of large-scale conflict. U.S. flies bombers and fighters in show of force over North Korea, and on and on. That's the actual news. But how have they been explaining this rise in the market prices? They've been saying it's because the fears of conflict with North Korea have receded. That's the only explanation that makes sense, because they can't say, hey, fourth largest metropolitan area in the United States just got basically taken out by a storm. That's not happy news. So that's the world you live in right now. And the fear here is that it leads to some sort of violent revolution in the markets, which is why we're going to be hosting a webinar with Grant Williams and Lance Roberts on September 13th. That's at noon. It's a live webinar. You get to ask your own questions, where we're going to be talking about these dangerous markets, what the risks really are, not stuff you're going to read in the mainstream news. So if you're interested in markets, finance, where these things are going, protecting yourself, your portfolios from what we think is likely to come, please check out that webinar and sign up for it. It's going to be amazing. It's free to the enrolled members of Peak Prosperity. For everybody else, it's a $25 fee. But a lot cheaper than going to hear these two esteemed gentlemen at a conference, of course. And that's why we're bringing it to you this way. With that, I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening.